I'm delighted to see so many of you here today. I really do feel like Angelina Jolie. I'm sure that you have noticed that more than 50% of entrepreneurs start with less than 2,000 euros. Just to clarify, the status of auto-entrepreneur means that it is a status which under French law means that you start a business while having another activity on the side or some other income on the side. So for example, you have some additional income coming from a full-time or part-time job, you'll have some pension or you'll have some redundancy, you have some unemployment benefits, and at the same time you start your business. So you are an auto-entrepreneur. So 77% of people start as auto-entrepreneurs, i.e. they have some income on the side when they start their new venture. And as I mentioned before, 53% of entrepreneurs in whole, even those who are starting full-time, start with less than 2,000 euros, apologies. Out of those which are not auto-entrepreneurs, so they are full-time entrepreneurs, they are dedicating all their time to their venture, 35% of them start with more than 16,000 euros. But at the other side of the range, you've got 20% of full-time entrepreneurs who start with less than 2,000 euros. So there is definitely a difficulty for entrepreneurs to actually find some financing. Only 5% of entrepreneurs in whole take advantage of grants and subsidies. That is not much. And yeah, so 49% of entrepreneurs use their own money, savings, bootstrapping. 15% take a bank loan in the name of a new business. 7% take a bank loan in the name of, in their own name, and as I said, 5% use grants. So, how do entrepreneurs make their companies live during the first few years? Well, mostly they reinvest the turnover from their business into their ongoing business, but they also raise funds. This is how they make their company go on year after year. After 3 years of starting their business, 66% of companies are still functioning. What is quite interesting, and what is the main factor to predict the durability of a business? It is actually the will of the entrepreneur. The more the entrepreneur is dedicated to have his business go on for the long term, the higher probability that the durability rate will be high. Actually, it's quite interesting to note that 1 out of 10 entrepreneurs, when they start, they know that their venture will not last for more than 1 or 2 years. So if you keep those entrepreneurs with a very short-term span, short-term goal on the side, 69% of new businesses have a durability higher than 3 years. So these figures are actually quite high in France. I suppose that I think that in the UK they are slightly lower. I think there are less than 50% of businesses in the UK which are still going on after 3 years. So what is also quite interesting is that you can see that these entrepreneurs are all in all doing quite well after a few years. Their turnover after 3 years is, for 69% of them, higher than 32,000 euros. Still, 31% of them still make less or just 32,000 euros. But there are even some companies, some new businesses making more than or 760,000 euros. That's 5% of them. So these figures are actually quite positive. My advice on this is do not underestimate your project at the seed stage. The seed stage is when you are just starting. I'll come back to this concept of seed stage in a second. But the more you are able to work out your working capital requirements, i.e. the time frame that it will take you for your products to actually become cash, liquid to become some cash, the better you are in terms of making sure that you are able to assess your your financing needs. The biggest problem you could be into is when you have not done an appropriate assessment of your working capital requirements, and in a few months you have to actually go back to your banker to ask for a new credit line, such as an overdraft or a short-term facility. So it's really important to calculate accurately those working capital requirements. Just to give you perhaps another definition of working capital requirements, the working capital requirements are when the credits obtained from your suppliers are not enough to finance the stocks and credits granted to your clients. On the contrary, a company has some working capital resources when the credits it has obtained from its suppliers are enough to cover the financing of the stocks and the credits granted to clients. So working capital managing your working capital is going to be the most important thing, one of the most important things you'll have to do when you start your business. Access to finance remains a critical barrier to the success of entrepreneurial businesses. Ernst & Young issued a report in 2011 about entrepreneurial finance, and two-thirds of the entrepreneurs who were interviewed for the purpose of finalizing this report said that they found it very difficult to raise some financing in their respective countries. So today we're going to assess the key funding challenges that entrepreneurs experience and provide some recommendations for action that could be taken to actually meet your financing requirements along the line, along the life of your business. There are 4 stages in a business, as is set out on this slide. The first stage is pre-seed and seed financing. Then you come to the startup stage, then to the emerging growth stage, and then to the expansion stage. And as you can see, here you've got high risk when it's at the seed and startup stage, and the longer, the durability of the business, the track record of the entrepreneurs, and the lower the risk. So that means that you've got different types of financing available for each stage of your venture. The ideal scenario would be to have some appropriate means of financing for each stage of a development, and to have a smooth transition from one stage to the other. Obviously, that would be the best case scenario. However, today it's a little bit difficult because there are some funding gaps. I'll come to this point about funding gaps in a second. No two companies are alike in terms of their financing needs. It depends on the business model. For example, a high-tech startup will have probably less working capital requirements than a fashion startup, because you can actually make an app or a software just by using a MacBook and an iPhone and a good internet connection. Well, in the fashion business, obviously you need to have a bit more means to actually create your products. In particular, you need to have access to fabrics, material, spools of threads. You need to have also some to take into account some labor costs to actually have people making your products. Or if you don't do it in-house, then you also need to source it out to some suppliers and manufacturers. All this is going to cost money. I wouldn't say that fashion startups are the most resource-intensive ones. Obviously, if you want to start a mining business, that's going to be much more intensive, because you have to buy some enormous trucks and lots of tools, etc. But I would say that fashion startups are probably in the middle in terms of the working capital requirements when you start, compared to high-tech startups or etc. So, as I was mentioning before, there is clear evidence that some large gaps have appeared along the funding escalator in the wake of a financial crisis. And Ernst & Young conclusion, deriving from this 2011 report, is that these gaps make it difficult for entrepreneurial companies to start up and grow. And that means that they are unable to play the role that they should in enabling a sustained economic recovery. Big companies are at the moment not really hiring, they're even firing. So a lot of, in particular, young graduates coming out in the market, they want to create their own businesses because that's a way to actually have a job. But it's difficult for them to have access to finance. So the funding gaps are mainly around here. I'll come back to that in a second, but then when you come to the business angel to seed, to venture capital requirements, this is where the funding gap is mainly. So, funding sources at the pre-seed and seed stage. How do you get some financing? Pre-seed and seed stage is where the entrepreneurial business is just being established. The entrepreneur is thinking about how to make its prototypes, its new products, and it's basically the entrepreneur is assessing the viability of its business model, of his business model, sorry. So the financing needs are still relatively small, even smaller than a few years ago, because thanks to the advances of technology in particular, now starting up, doing a new venture is less expensive. If you think, for example, of cloud computing and some other tech advancements, it's easier to have all the appropriate tools at your disposal at a cheaper cost than a few years ago. So we're going to talk about, let's call him John Alexander, a talented graduate from Central St. Martin's who's just graduated from the fashion master under the direction of Louise Wilson. He is a protégé of Louise Wilson. His whole graduate collection was actually purchased by a fashionista during the graduate show. He's got a bright future ahead of him, John Alexander. So we're going to follow his evolution and his business evolution while he creates his own fashion label. Well, first port of call. Friends, family, and fools. What we call in France, love money. So John Alexander, as I said, wants to start his fashion label. He's got some savings, some inheritance money that he got from one of his grandparents who died a few years ago. So he takes £5,000 from his piggy bank, and that's the start of his raising of seed money. It's £5,000 coming from bootstrapping. Now he goes to his parents and he explains that Mom and Dad, I really want to start this fashion label. You know that this is what I've been wanted to do since I was 5 years old. Can you give me a hand? His dad says, fine, we'll give you a hand, John Alexander, but we've worked hard for this money, for this 10 grand that we're going to lend you. So you're going to pay us a small interest rate on this £10,000 that we are going to lend you. And John Alexander is a fashion guy, but he's also a business-savvy person. And he cannot afford to go and see a lawyer straight away because he doesn't want to put money in this. But he goes to his Citizens Advice Bureau of his borough, and he gets the help from an advisor to understand what he's supposed to do to actually have this personal loan put in place with his parents. The advisor says, well, I think in order to avoid family rifts and problems in the future, it's really important to have your loan set out in writing, so to have a written loan agreement, and there's going to be, as you mentioned, an interest rate attached to this loan, so you have to say to your parents that they will have to pay some income tax on these earnings, on the interest that they will get from you paying this interest. So please bear in mind that there are some tax implications to putting this interest-bearing loan in place with your parents. So John Alexander is fine with that. He goes to his mum and dad, says, okay, I've written the loan agreement. Are you okay to sign it? Parents say yes. He's got 10 grand, so that's 5 grand from his savings, 10 grand from his parents. He's got 15 grand. His goal is to raise around £30,000 of seed money. So he's progressing quite well, but he's not quite there yet. So now he goes to his nan, and he says, Grandma, I really would like to actually start this fashion label. You know how keen I have been of doing this since I was a little kid. Could you give me a hand? his nanny says, okay, that's fine, I'll make a gift, I'll give you some money, I'll make a donation to you, and I'll give you £5,000 for this year, that's fine. John Alexander just wants to check that everything is watertight, so he goes back to the Citizens Advice Bureau. I mean, he could have gone also to the Consumer Credit Counseling Service, but the Citizens Advice Bureau is closer to his house. So anyway, the advisor there says, John Alexander, it's not going to be possible because, you know, a donation, a gift in England is actually subject to inheritance tax, okay? And in England, you've got an exemption, an annual exemption of £3,000. So the highest sum of money that your grandmother could give you is actually £3,000 this year, okay? And that she could also give you a few cash gifts of no more than £250, as many as she wants this year. But otherwise, the only donation she can make you is £3,000 this year. Goes back to his nan, they actually write down a donation agreement between his grandmother and him, and she makes a donation of £3,000. So now John Alexander's got £18,000 of seed money, which is good, he's doing well. So he goes to the pub to catch up with his mate David, and David is a little bit older than him, and now he's an associate in an investment bank in the city, Merrill Lynch Bank of America. So David is making quite a lot of money. And David says, well, John Alexander, I'm thrilled, you know, that you're starting your fashion label. Fantastic stuff. I'd be happy to invest in it, you know, as an equity investor. And yeah, so whenever you are ready, I'm happy to give you some cash in exchange for some equity shareholding in your company. So John Alexander thinks about it, and he knows it has a seed and pre-seed stage. He's not even done his prototypes yet, you know, his products. So he goes back to David and he says, David, thank you so much for the offer, but right now I don't think I'm really ready to get some business angel money in my venture. I'll come back to you in a second. This is parenthesis. I'll explain to you later what a business angel is. So I'm not quite sure that I'm ready to have equity investment in my company yet, because actually I don't want to incorporate a company yet. I want to work as a sole trader while I'm at the seed stage, so I don't want to incorporate a company. It's a bit too early for me, so I'll bear your offer in mind when I need to raise some equity investment. But for the moment, David, I think I'll be fine. So £18,000, that's where he's at, and he needs 30,000. So he's got a mentor, John Alexander, and his mentor is called Gareth. Gareth has also set up his own fashion label, and a few years ago, so he's got a bit more experience than John Alexander. And Gareth says to John Alexander, I really do think that you should also apply for grants, you know. You should really look at all possible avenues to raise this funding that you need, John Alexander. So John Alexander applies. There's been this great scheme which has been set up in England, which is called Startup Britain. It's a £112 million loan scheme set up by this government, which offers 18 to 30 years old entrepreneurs some loans of around £2,500 to actually start up their business. The interest rate, I think, personally, is a bit high. It's around 6%, 6.25% APR. I personally think it's a bit high, but it's nonetheless worth applying for this £2,000. So what John Alexander does is that he goes to Alison Louis, who is the founder of Fashion Angel. Fashion Angel is an organization which basically supports fashion entrepreneurs in raising some funds, understanding what their market is, finding some distribution channels. So he goes to Alison Louis from a Fashion Angel, and she applies on his behalf with him, really, to get this £2,500 loan from Startup Britain. Bang, he gets that. Great. Now he goes to the British Fashion Council. He's heard about their new James scheme. That is some support provided to catwalk designers towards the financial cost of doing their shows, and also some support in terms of finding them some space where they can actually do their catwalks. The British Fashion Council New James scheme also sponsors the presentation and exhibition spaces to showcase the collections. Okay, so Mary Catron Zoo, Christopher Kane and Herdem have actually benefited from the New Gen scheme. John Alexander applies to this, and he gets in. He could also have applied to Fashion Fringe. Fashion Fringe was set up in 2003 by Colin McDowell and the talent agency IMG Fashion. Fashion Fringe nurtures some talents, such as Fashion Fringe winners Herdem or Fyodor and Golan, who are actually here with us today. So if you would like to speak to Fyodor and Golan after the presentation to know more about Fashion Fringe, please do not hesitate. And the Fashion Fringe is an annual award platform offering some talented emerging designers the chance to launch their label in London through a combined program of mentoring, studio space, financial support, and a catwalk show at London Fashion Week. Fashion Fringe is an IMG event. And finally, John Alexander, who is still short around £10,000, applies to the Creative Industry Finance. He applies for a Creative Industry Finance loan. Creative Industry Finance is an initiative from the Art Council England, and it was launched in March 2013. It provides creative industries entrepreneurs with loans between £5,000 and £25,000. So quite a lot of money actually if you get in. And yeah, it also obviously includes fashion entrepreneurs. And it's limited to people who are based in London, Yorkshire and Humber for now. Don't ask me why. So anyway, John Alexander applies and he gets in as well. So he's got his 30 grand.
Sorry, what was that called again?
It's called the Creative Industry Finance. And it's an initiative of the Art Council England. Right, so John Alexander would like also to give a go to a new peer-to-peer channel that is heard of, which is called crowdfunding. Now he's actually done his prototypes and his products while he benefited from this, I don't know, £20,000 that he raised through seed finance. So he's done his prototypes, he's done the designs that he wants to do for his menswear fashion label, and so he's got something to present really to the world. I would say that he starts to have some proof of concept, i.e. he can actually prove, he can demonstrate that he's got some products that he can actually sell. This is just the start of a proof of concept, but it's a start. So what is crowdfunding? Crowdfunding is a way of attracting small amounts of funding or donations directly from multiple investors using social media and internet channels. One of the most successful and famous crowdfunding sites is actually called Kickstarter. In 2012, I believe, Amanda Palmer, an American musician, raised $1.2 million out of a Kickstarter campaign. So it was really a great platform for the creative industries. Since its inception, Kickstarter has raised $4.39 million for fashion startups. Apparently, this is actually quite a low success rate. It's only a success rate of 26.76%. But hey, it's $4.39 million that they've raised for fashion startups. So it might be an avenue to look at, putting a fashion campaign on Kickstarter. However, John Alexander is a keen reader of Elle UK, and he's seen last week that a new crowdfunding platform has actually launched in London, in the UK, in relation to, which is dedicated, to fashion entrepreneurs. So what is interesting about these crowdfunding sites is that in exchange for the amount of money which the investors are putting into the business, which is dead money, by the way, it's not equity, it's dead money, they get in exchange some small rewards. So for example, I saw this funny fashion campaign in Kickstarter, whereby if you would finance this Chicago-based menswear label, you would get a tie and a bow tie if you would put $60 in the campaign, and you would get 2 bow ties and 1 tie if you get 100 if you put 100. So yeah, and another avenue is to also apply for Wow Crazy. Wow Crazy is not really a crowdfunding site. It's actually, they call themselves a pre-order based fashion community dedicated to fashion designers and brands. So you place your order on Wow Crazy with the designer that you like, and then no money is taken from your account initially, and if the fashion designer manages to have enough orders to actually raise his targets, then your account will be debited, your order will be processed, and that is that. So John Alexander, as I said, is a savvy guy, and he's thinking, well, hang on, if I put all my designs, and also I mentioned the name of my brand, my label, on this crowdfunding campaign, that means that everyone will know about it. And I don't want to have my products knocked off. I don't want to have my designs knocked off. So what do I do? As I said, he's an ex-graduate from Central St. Martin's, which is part of the University of the Arts London. And he knows that there is a non-profit organization at University of the Arts London, which is called Own It, which provides some free intellectual property advice to fashion entrepreneurs in particular. So he goes to the Own It IP clinic and explains his concerns. The trainee lawyer, because very often trainee lawyers who are at the IP clinic, tells him, well, what I think you should do, John Alexander, is that I think now is the right time for you to actually apply for the registration of your trademark with the UK Intellectual Property Office, since, as you said, you're going to put it out there in the public domain by putting your crowdfunding campaign. So this should not deter you from starting the crowdfunding campaign, because as soon as you've applied with a UK Intellectual Property Office for registration of your trademark, that it will be deemed to be protected from day one, from the application date. Okay, so that's the first thing. And also, John Alexander, this solicitor, tells him, I think you should think about your strategy to protect your designs. You have a 12 months grace period when you you've got a 12 months grace period during which you can actually register your designs with either the UK Intellectual Property Office, or if you want to have a community registered design, then you will apply with HOIM, which is the organization HOIM is Organization for Harmonization of the Internal Market, which is based in Spain. And obviously, if you have a community registered design, then it will be protected within the European Union. So you've got that 12 months grace period, John Alexander, during which you can assess which designs are the best sellers, and therefore you can actually, within that 12 months grace period, register those ones so that you are sure that they are protected and nobody will copy them. So with this information, John Alexander started to start his crowdfunding campaign, and he manages to achieve his target of £30,000. Now, John Alexander is at the startup stage. He begins the process of demonstrating the commercial viability of his business. He starts to make some initial revenues, he starts to sell his products, he identifies some sales and distribution channels, and builds some awareness of his business. So the financing needs that he's experiencing at this stage are a bit higher, because he needs to recruit some staff, he needs to have some marketing people on board, some sales people on board, he needs to invest into infrastructure. He can't work from his bedroom anymore, he needs to have a studio space. And also he needs to put his business plan into action. So the common challenges at this stage for startup entrepreneurs is that basically, it's still considered a high-risk moment for the company, and a lot of banks and also equity investors are still quite reluctant to invest in startups. So basically, startups still mean they face the same issues than companies which are at the seed stage, and that we keep on having recourse to bootstrapping their own savings, and also reaching out to their friends and family to make the business survive. However, some business angels might become interested in their venture. So business angels, now is the moment to actually define that term. A business angel is an affluent individual, like the David I mentioned before, who often are successful business people in their own right, and who has decided to invest a portion of his or her wealth into other companies. So what is good with business angels is because they are successful business people themselves, they can also be mentors to the young entrepreneur. And often they can also be an advocate for your business. So it's important to find the right fit when you're actually looking for a business angel. He needs to provide the money, but it would be great as well if he or she is a good mentor and a good advocate for your business. So business angels organize themselves in networks or groups, angel groups. And in the UK, there are some excellent tax incentive schemes which business angels always use, which are called the Enterprise Investment Scheme and the Small Enterprise Investment Scheme. So the UK is actually a very good place for business angel money. In Europe, it's probably the largest market for business angel money. There are 624 business angels in the UK, and that is around $74 million of business angel money in the market in the UK. So that's quite substantial, and this is the right place to find business and equity money. As I mentioned to you before, there is a funding gap, and it's got worse and worse with the financial crisis since 2007. Basically, companies which have funding requirements between $25,000 and $500,000 are usually served quite well by the business angel community. And then companies which have funding requirements above $3 million are usually served well by the venture capital community, which is the second stage to equity money. You've got business angel, venture capital, and then private equity. We'll come back to private equity and VCs in a moment. But the companies which have capital requirements between $500,000 and $3 million are basically sitting between two stools. So this is where the funding gap is. So there has been some successful investment by business angels in the fashion sector. I'm thinking here in particular of Francesco Maio, who is an Italian citizen, but he's a tax resident in France. And Francesco Maio has been recently cited as being in the top 10 business angels in France by the French business magazine Challenges. So he's really a guy to watch out. He's invested in at least 4 fashion startups. One of them being called Instant Luxe. Instant Luxe is a platform on which buyers and sellers can actually meet to trade second-hand luxury items, such as a Hermes Kelly bag or some great jewelry from Tiffany. And what is great about Instant Luxe is that they also they use the services of valuers, people whose business is to actually value luxury items, so that they can check the authenticity of the product, check that it is not counterfeited, and also that they can also do an assessment of the price of such a second-hand product. Instant Luxe is so successful that it has now started to also trade in the UK. It used to be a French website only, and now it's also started in the UK. And the point I'm trying to make is that all Francesco Maio's investment in fashion startups are actually fashion/tech startups. He's actually selected investments which are all very much geared towards the online consumer market. This is really something to bear in mind. At the moment, a lot of investors, equity investors, are, let's say it, only interested in investing in fashion/tech startups. Because they want a lot of, quickly, they want a return on the investment of their money. I'll explain more in a few more details what I mean by that in a second. Basically, the right moment for, let's go back to John Alexander, to approach business angels is when you've got proof of concept. That means that you've got your distribution, channel in place. You've got several stockists around the world. You're actually making some decent sales. Perhaps your company is not yet having many revenues, but it's important to demonstrate, to be able to show that you actually have some products which sell well, and that you've got some stockists in place, and that you've really thought out also your supply chain. You've got some good agreements with your suppliers and manufacturers. This is when you have proof of concept that you can actually reach out to a business angels. Before that, it's going to be very difficult. Business angels are quite skeptic towards fashion startups. They do not feel comfortable assessing and valuing the inner quality of a fashion product that is shown to them by the fashion entrepreneurs. I've been told that many times by VCs or business angels. They just don't really, they're not fashion guys, you know. So I've got a funny story to tell you quickly about that. It was told by Tamara Mellon when she was interviewed by VFT a few years ago. Tamara Mellon is the co-founder of Jimmy Choo, as I'm sure you know, and she was speaking about Robert Bensoussan, the chief executive officer of Jimmy Choo at the time, who started to speak to some private equity guys who were working for a private equity fund called Phoenix in 2001. And he said to them, guys, you should really invest in Jimmy Choo. You know, we do great products. And the Phoenix guys said to him, Jimmy who? So Robert Bensoussan said, well, just go back to your wives tonight and ask them about Jimmy Choo, and then come back to me. And they did. The private equity guys did that, and they came back and they were brimming with enthusiasm, Tamara Mellon says. So they actually had to ask their wives what they thought about the product to get convinced that this was a good company to invest in. So this is true. You know, these guys, they wear pinstripes all year round. So if you show them a fashion product, they won't be able to set that. What they want to see is that the fashion entrepreneur is professional, business-minded, plan-oriented, and prepared. How do you get prepared? You draft a business plan. Well, this is rule of thumb. You want to get some equity, guys? You need to have done your homework. You need to have prepared. You need to have prepared a business plan. If you don't see this, forget it. Don't even contemplate going to some equity money. It will be just a waste of time to everyone. I'm tough here, but you need to. I need to raise your awareness about this. I'm terribly sorry. You need to prepare your business plan. Otherwise, don't even contemplate going to an equity person. He won't speak to you. There's so much competition. So what is a business plan? A business plan is a formal statement of a set of business goals, the reasons they are believed attainable, and the plan for reaching those goals. The business plan may contain some background information about the organization or team attempting to reach those goals. In a business plan, you should set out a 3 to 5 year business plan, So basically your business plan should relate to a period between 3 to 5 years, even 7, because this is the time frame within which the equity investor will want to invest in your business. They will also want to get the information about the annual return within that time frame, 5 to 7 years. So in this business plan, it's critical to include some projected earnings and cash flow figures for the next 3 to 7 years, and a clear list of the budget allocation that you are going to make once you've received some funding from these equity guys. How are you going to use the money, basically? So in this business plan, it's critical to set out a detailed market study about your clients and prospects. Do you know who your clients are? Do you have some invoices? Well, put a copy of your invoices into your business plan. Demonstrate that you already have some orders and some account receivables, that basically you are trading, that you have proof of concept. So what about your supply chain? You need to set out in your business plan that you've really worked out your supply chain. You've got your supply chain sorted, you know exactly who your supplier are, and your manufacturers if you need to use them. You've actually sign with them some non-disclosure agreement in place, some NDA, to make sure that you've actually protected your intellectual property, your designs. When you've given them some drawings of what they should do, before you gave them these drawings, you actually signed an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement with them. You need to explain all these, that you've actually really looked at all these aspects into your business plan, and when you also speak to these business angels. One thing I forgot to mention actually about this confidentiality is that on the first page of your business plan, it's really important also to set out a confidentiality provision along the following lines. This business plan has been addressed solely to you, has been addressed for your own and sole review. You are not supposed to send it to anyone else, any third party, and all the information set out in this business plan is completely confidential. Something along those lines should be set out on a confidentiality provision should be set out on your business plan. It is quite important because you don't want the business angel to actually forward it on to all his mates in the city, you know, 1,000 people. So before you send the business plan out, of course, you need to make sure that you can trust that person. You need to check the reputability of the business angel so that, you know, he's not going to divulge it to anyone because he wants to keep his reputation as being an honest and individual and gentleman. So don't even try to have a business angel or an equity person sign an NDA, a non-disclosure agreement. They won't do it. I've asked, they won't even contemplate. It means basically it conveys the message that you don't trust them. So don't do that. Coming back to what should be set out in your business plan, which really is explaining what your strategy is for the next 3 to 7 years. So it contains vital information for your business. You should also set out your distribution channel. So where are you going to sell your items? In department stores, in independent boutiques, through e-commerce, pure e-tailers? Are you going to sell them at sports stores? What are you going to do with unsold stock? Have you thought about that? Are you going to go through discounters, online discounters, or some village, can't remember what it's called, but you know it's outside London and you can actually... Here you go, that one. So they will grill you. The equity guys will grill you, and they will ask you questions about what is the best case scenario for your business and what is the worst case scenario. And they will ask you lots of questions about the worst case scenario and how you're going to deal with it. A bonus would be if you already have some franchising or licensing agreement in place for your fashion label. By that I mean that quite a lot of brands nowadays, they have some basically licensees whereby they can actually assign the use of a trademark, so of their intellectual property, to some licensees, which in turn create some products using that brand. For example, eyewear, perfumes. This is where you do a lot of, most fashion and luxury businesses have got licenses in place for their eyewear and perfume products. Even also cheeringware. Cheeringware is very often done by some licensees. So if you've already managed to actually strike a deal with a licensee to get this new perfume deal on, it's great. Put it on your business plan because that means that you will generate some income, some royalties for your business. Now, another aspect which is very important for your fashion startup is that you need also to think about the presentation of your intellectual property. As I mentioned before, John Alexander, he registered his trademark before he actually put his crowdfunding campaign online. So that's already done. But if you, for example, you create an innovation which is new and has some industrial applications, then it's also good to apply for a patent. In the fashion sector, there aren't many new innovations, so to speak, but there is one area where it's quite important to do so, is when you create a new, the one area where usually patents are required is women's underwear. For example, I don't want to go too much into this, so if you have some questions, come to me after the presentation. But recently, a patent was actually taken on some new bra. It was called the 100-way bra. So let's not go too much into this, but patent could also be relevant to your business. And then again, you have to put in place a strategy for the registration and protection of your designs, as I mentioned earlier when John Alexander went to own it. So that also needs to be all explained in your business plan, because that is the core of your brand. This is the most important asset you have is your intellectual property when you've got a fashion label. Right, okay, so we've talked about the equity. We've talked a lot about the equity money. Now let's go back to working capital requirements. As I told you before, working capital requirements are going to be critical, especially at the beginning of your business. Another definition for working capital, so that you can really grasp this concept, which is a bit complicated, is that basically working capital is the interval quantified in time of a transformation of the result into cash. Okay? The lower the working capital, or the highest the rotation of working capital, the more cash is generated. So usually working capital is financed by short-term instruments, such as an overdraft. It's interesting, for example, to note that a company which wants to develop some business in Southern Europe will probably end up with having more working capital requirements than a company which is based in Northern Europe, or I think England, or the Scandinavian countries. Why? Because the culture in Southern Europe is that you take longer to pay your account receivables than in Northern Europe. So, for example, in Italy, it can take up to 120, 160 days to get paid in the fashion trade. Yeah, that's right. So, for example, I go to a lot of trade shows, and I was at Who's Next around 2 weeks ago in Paris, and I spoke to the owner of a fashion brand called Sessoun, Audrey, and she explained that when she started a business, I think in the 90s, no banks would lend her anything. She wouldn't manage to get an overdraft. So she started to do all this trade show thing, and then all the Japanese buyers were very, very interested in her products. Sessoun is a very nice brand. They actually sell internationally a lot. We've got 200 stockists worldwide, and in particular they sell on ASOS.com. Okay, so the products are really beautiful. Japanese buyers immediately saw that, and they started placing some orders. And what is fantastic with Japanese buyers is that they pay 50% deposit when they place the orders. Cool. So Audrey was able actually to get enough money to through the deposits to actually finance the orders with her suppliers. Because she would also give them a 30 to 40% deposit when she would place the orders. And then she would rush to actually do all the orders for the Japanese buyers. She would get paid when she would deliver those orders to the Japanese buyers, the outstanding 50%. And with that, then she would actually honor the European orders, because the European buyers were not paying any money on deposit when they were placing the orders. What can you do? It was not the practice at the time. So common sense advice from me to you: sell only to solvent clients. Negotiate the payment conditions, both with your suppliers and your buyers. If possible, ask for 20–30% deposit from your buyers. And if possible, refuse to pay more than, I'd say, 50% deposit to your suppliers, if possible. Certainly do not pay 100% of the money to your suppliers straight away, because it's going to make your working capital requirements enormous, and also you don't have any leverage anymore on the supplier if you've paid 100% of the order straight away. Stock mainly products with strong commercial potential and wide margins, and if possible, do not accept consignment orders. Of course, if you absolutely want to be at this super hip concept store such as Dover Street Market or Colette, fine, you can make an exception. You really want to be very sustainment, so you accept a consignment order. Otherwise, consignment orders are really difficult to manage. It means that you never know when you're going to be paid. But consignment order is when basically you just give the product to a shop, and the shop will pay you only when they get when they actually manage to sell the product to their customers. So you could be paying in a year's time. So from a management of your from a cash flow management standpoint, it's very tough. So do not accept consignment orders if possible. So okay, so John Alexander, yeah, he needs to actually free up the value of his sales ledger, his sales receivables, because at the moment, his account receivable, sorry, at the moment his problem is that his business is growing, but he doesn't have the cash to actually honor the orders made by his buyers. because they don't pay him any deposit, because they are European buyers, he's left in the situation where he's got to turn down some orders because he doesn't have the money to actually pay the suppliers. So it's a vicious circle. He wants to get out of his vicious circle and get into a virtuous circle. So what does he do? He speaks to Hilden Corporation, which is based in New York. Hilden Corporation is a factor, a fashion factor. They are specialized in providing factoring services to fashion businesses. For example, they look after Alexander Wang. They used to look after Marc Jacobs before he was part of the LVMH group. They also work with Nicholas Kirkwood here in the UK. They are trying to actually develop their brand in Europe. And basically what they do is that again, they lend you against your invoices. They use your invoices as collateral. So you give them the invoices, they give you 90% of the invoices straight away within 24 to 48 hours. And they will chase the, they will collect the invoices for you. So they will do the credit control. They will go after your clients and they will make sure that the accounts receivables are paid. Okay? Once the money comes in, they will give you the 10%, the outstanding 10% minus their fees. Okay? That is the job of a factor. And here you have to see that it's slightly different from another type of invoice financing, which is called invoice discounting. In invoice discounting, which is available for companies with a turnover of at least £500,000, invoice discounting is where you get this 90% of your 90% of the value of your invoices straight away, but you keep the credit control, i.e. it's going to be your internal, your in-house accountant people who are going to chase your the payment of this account receivables. But that is not really opened for companies which make less than $500 million or pounds of turnover. So here, in any case, with John Alexander, what he needs is invoice factoring, and he gets it. He gets it. He could have gone actually another route. What he could have gone to actually free up his sales ledger, he could have also gone to purchase order financing. Purchase order financing is basically a short-term commercial finance option that provides capital to pay your suppliers upfront, so your company does not have to deplete its cash reserves. So usually the company, and Hilden Corporation does that as well, and they call it entrepreneurial finance. So that usually comes with some personal guarantees from the fashion entrepreneur, okay? But what they do is that they will provide your supplier with a letter of credit from Hilden Corporation, for example, showing that his order will be paid. Once the supplier has actually delivered the goods, then he will get paid 100%. So this is called purchase order financing. If you've got more questions about this, come to speak to me after the presentation. Right, okay. Very quickly, John Alexander now thinks that he's at the stage where he's got to develop his business internationally. And in the UK, we've got this great scheme which is called the Trade Show Access Programme, which is managed at a national level by UKTI, UK Trade Investment, a very dynamic agency. And for the fashion sector, it's actually managed by UK Fashion and Textile. Okay? And UKFT organizes some trade shows around several key destinations for the fashion community, so that the British-based, England-based fashion entrepreneurs can go out there and show their products at these various trade shows. You usually have a small grant towards the cost of your stand, of your booth, of between £1,000 to £3,000, depending on which sector you go. If you go to the BRICS, I think you'll have a grant of £2,500 towards the cost of your stand. And it's great. I mean, for example, in August, these guys are going to the Hub, which is a new trade show in Hong Kong. Yeah, that's where I met Fyodor and Golan at Tranoï in March 2013 in Paris. So John Alexander, of course, takes advantage of this to actually show in various destinations. Pitti Uomo in Florence, Bread and Butter in Berlin. Now, the business of John Alexander is at the emerging growth stage, And it is a critical stage of the entrepreneur's life cycle. Once an entrepreneur has been able to demonstrate a market for their product or service, the venture enters the emerging growth stage. So the company will be earning some revenues, but it is unlikely to be sufficient to actually fund the expansion of this business. So that means that some external finance will be needed to invest into infrastructure, get some bigger premises, and also hire some employees. Now, with a track record behind him and a management team that has demonstrated its competence, John Alexander is in a much better position to actually go to speak to banks and why not some VCs as well. So bank financing in the UK, it's bad. It's really bad. The banks are, and this is a personal opinion that I have, not playing their role into supporting entrepreneurs in the UK. And the reasons that they put forward is that now they have to comply with all these Basel III regulatory requirements, and what do they do? You know, its cost of capital is becoming so much more expensive. So either they stop lending to SMEs altogether, or they pass on the cost of this higher borrowing rate to their borrowers. So nowadays in the UK, you've got some borrowers who find themselves with much higher interest rates to pay to get the same type of financing that they used to have before 2007, before the financial crisis. John Alexander tries to apply, and he doesn't get through. He goes to his dad's bank, and they say no. They turn him down. He can't get a loan. So what does he do? You can see actually the crash, 2008, 2007, bang, it went down, and then now it's coming back up, but still for SMEs it's very difficult. They've been disproportionately affected by the financial crisis, SMEs. So John Alexander, coming back to him, sorry, he can't secure a loan. What does he do? He comes to me. Now he's got the ability to actually have a lawyer, and he speaks to me about his trouble, not being able to get some bank financing. And I said to him, John Alexander, why don't you apply for a credit guarantee scheme? That's what you should do. Since March 2012, a national loan guarantee scheme has been set up in the UK. And that is a scheme which helps businesses access cheaper finance by reducing the cost of bank loans under the scheme by 1%. This enterprise finance guarantee provides a 75% guarantee on each individual loan issued under the scheme. And thanks to that, it's hopefully easier for fashion entrepreneurs to get some access to bank finance. In France, they've even created a fashion bank, which is a credit guarantee scheme for fashion entrepreneurs. When you actually negotiate with your banker to get a loan agreement, it's going to be called a corporate facility. It's possible that they will ask you for a personal guarantee. My advice is do have all these documents reviewed by your lawyer, your solicitor. It's really important, because something you really don't find yourself, the situation you don't want to find yourself in is your business is not going very well, and then it becomes very easy for the bank to actually basically use this personal guarantee to also have access to your house, all your assets, your personal assets. So if it's already complicated in your business life, you want to make sure that you've got all the protections in place in the personal guarantee, so that your bank cannot have access too easily, at least, to your personal assets. Probably the bank is also going to ask for some security over assets of a business, your inventory, your intellectual property. Again, I would really suggest that you have your solicitor reviewing these documents, because you want to make sure that they are watertight and it's not going to be too easy for a bank to actually take your assets, your business assets, away from you. There are plenty of other points that need to be negotiated in the loan agreement itself, but I think we need to move forward now. So if you have some questions about loan corporate facilities, don't hesitate to come to me afterwards. Okay, so other avenue when you're at the emerging growth stage is to go to VCs, venture capital. Remember what I said, first stage of equity financing, business angels. Second stage, venture capital, VCs. London is I'd say, yeah, it's the capital of VC communities in Europe. So this is the place to be, and it's great for fashion entrepreneurs. VCs expect to get a return of between 5 and 10 times their initial equity investment in about 5 to 7 years. So that means that the companies receiving equity finance are expected to produce an annual return for investors of at least 26%. This is really high. I spoke to James, who is the co-founder of the VC fund called Find, Invest, Grow, actually at the launch of his creative industry finance scheme I was talking to you about. And he was saying that what he expects when he invests into a company is to get a return of 15 times, 15 times his money back within 3 to 5 years. Oh, so the average investment is 8 times his money back. Personally, I don't think that this is compatible with a fashion startup, with a fashion business, especially if it's a high-end fashion business when you want to make it a luxury fashion business. I think really when you are looking for some equity finance, you really have to gauge whether this VC fund has some experience investing into consumer goods companies, because if they try to impose you a time frame where they cut every cost, every marketing every marketing cost, every PR cost to put your luxury products in the best places with the best magazines, etc. If they try to cut all the cost and they force you to basically have this return on 15 times their money back, then it's going to be very incompatible. I think it's going to be incompatible with developing on the long term a high-end fashion business. So be careful who you get married with, so to speak. Yeah. So in G20 countries, like in the UK, after the financial crisis, the VC community mainly invest into later stage companies to help them commercialize their business and accelerate growth from a sales and marketing standpoint. They will not invest in startups, as I mentioned before. There has been a consolidation of VC firms, which has reduced opportunities and increased the competition for available funding. So again, you need to have a very, very strong business plan, and you need to be super prepared when you speak to VCs. They have invested a lot in fashion tech startups. For example, Farfetch, the pure e-tailer, got a $20 million financing earlier this year. The Guild Group as well got $236 million of VC money earlier this year. All these fashion tech startups are getting the biggest part of the VC money. Why? Because VCs are looking for big exits, okay? A few years ago, the pure retailers like Net-a-Porter and ASOS.com make massive return on the investments to the VCs, okay? And the VCs are looking for this type of fashion tech startups which are going to be the next Net-a-Porter and ASOS of this world. So they're investing in Moda Operandi, Little Fashion Gallery, Wool & the Gang, all these online-based fashion businesses. Perhaps, you know, food for thought. Perhaps you should think of turning your fashion label into something which is more accessible online, because that is the way of the future. Once you've got this bank money or this equity money secured, what do? Well, you keep on working. You keep on working and having a vision for your business. You keep in touch with your financial stakeholders. Of course, you need to stay on top of your loan repayments for your loan if you've got one. You also need to keep in touch with your equity backers. They'll probably sit on the board. They'll probably ask to get a seat on your board, so you need to, update them about your successes, about the press clippings, about the new stockists you get. They want to have some tangible evidence that you are doing well. And and develop a thriving business. Follow the principles of lean manufacturing. What is lean manufacturing? It's basically a production practice that considers the expenditure of resources for any goal over than the creation of value for the end customer to be wasteful and versus a target of elimination. So the typical example of lean manufacturing for a fashion business is do not keep all this stock, all this inventory on your racks in the studio. Just get it out there to a stockist, to a shop, because it should be actually been seen by some potential clients who can buy them. You know, don't keep all this inventory in your studio. It needs to go out in the world and be sold. Plan ahead. Think about what is going to be the next stage for your business, which is now at the emerging growth stage, and update your business plan. Now, very, very quickly. You are at the expansion stage. John Alexander is at the expansion stage, which is that he's proven his business model. He's proven that his business model is effective, and the focus shifts to rapidly scaling up the venture to capitalize on the growth opportunity. That means that his menswear fashion label is a success in the UK. It works super well. Every British man wants to wear his products, and he's now started to do some shoes. He's got a perfume on, and now he wants to scale it. He wants to go international with it, and also he wants to be both online and offline. When you have demonstrated your concept, now you actually need to reap off the profit from that by scaling it. So expansion is all about scaling up. The company is already profitable, or at least, has some free cash flow that can be channeled into investment, and that will facilitate the growth. But these profits are probably unlikely to be enough to achieve the pace of expansion that is desired. For example, I don't know if you heard about Marni, the Italian fashion brand. They actually sold off to Only the Brave, which is the holding company owned by Renzo Rosso, the founder of Diesel, and he also owns Victor and Rolf, etc. Marni was desperate to open some big flagship stores in the US and probably also in Asia, but they didn't have the cash flow to do it. So they found this agreement with Renzo Rosso to be able to finance their expansion. But to keep control over your business, I think that it might be best, instead of doing a pure, simple acquisition like Christopher Kane did or many other businesses, I think it's also interesting when you are at the expansion stage to have a look at other avenues where you keep control over your business. Because, I mean, John Alexander, this is his baby, you know, that's what he's been doing since he was 24, and he wants to keep control over his business. So what does he do? He tries to do an IPO, an initial public offering. So initial public offering in the fashion sector, IPOs have been actually quite successful recently. Salvatore Ferragamo and Brunello Cucinelli have actually done an IPO on the Milan Stock Exchange quite recently. They've managed to actually return investment for their shareholders of 100% since they did the IPO. Fabulous. Michael Kors in the US did an IPO, I think earlier this year or in 2012. Even better, they returned since their IPO 200% on the investment of their shareholders. So IPOs in the fashion sector are doing very well at the moment. And what it is quite interesting is that through these IPOs, you can pay back your debt and you can also finance your expansion. Prada, for example, very highly geared as a company, Prada. They tried to do an IPO in 2001, failed. 2002, failed. 2007, failed again. And then eventually in 2011, they did their IPO on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, managed to pay back quite a lot of the debt. They have more than 2 billion euros of debt they had. And then they also managed to finance their expansion. So it's a good way, an IPO, to finance this expansion and keep control over your business. Another way is go to private equity, guys. As I mentioned before, Jimmy Choo did that. They did that. They sold off a $45 million majority stake to Phoenix, the private equity fund, in 2001. In 2004, Phoenix sold the business to another private equity fund called Lion Capital for £100 million. which sold it on to Tower Brooks for £185 million in 2007. So basically, Jimmy Choo has been changing owner every 3 or 5 years since 2001. Tamara Mellon, quit the business. She just decided to leave because she doesn't. In this article, in this article published in VFT, she said these guys do not have any long-term view. They just in it to actually reap the rewards for 3 or 4 years. They also put a lot of debt in the company because basically to buy the company they need to do some mezzanine finance and LBO. They need to put a lot of debt in it to actually be able to finance it. And then 3 or 4 years after, they exit. And so in terms of building a luxury brand, it's very complicated because when you build a luxury brand, it takes time. It takes time. So now actually Jimmy Choo is owned by La Belux, the German privately owned luxury group that also owns Bailly and Belstaff since 2011. So they left the private equity world. But other stories about private equity investments in luxury brands are, for example, the acquisition by Permira, the private equity fund, of the Valentino fashion group in 2007 for 2.6 billion euros. It didn't work out at all. It was sold earlier this year or last year to the Qatar royal family for 700 million euros. I'm talking about Valentino. The brand Valentino was sold at a loss to the Qatar royal family. What Permira really wanted to get at was actually Hugo Boss. The brand Hugo Boss was part of the Valentino fashion group, and that was profitable. So Permira is still the owner of Hugo Boss as of today, but otherwise the love story with Valentino didn't end well. And there are many other stories like this. So I don't think that for high-end luxury brands, private equity investments are the way forward. But you never know. Sometimes you can invest in a good consumer goods private equity fund, like, for example, JP Partners, which is based in the US, which has invested in La Perla or Alex and Annie, and they are consumer goods focused, and maybe they will do better. Yes?
Yeah, doesn't Prensa Schooler belong to the Valentino group by now as well, and how does that affect them?
I think that it is a good point, because Valentino actually might be... I will have to check about this, but basically Prensa Schooler is owned by Fiori. No, hang on. And Fiori is owned by Fast Fashion. Fast Fashion is a Japanese brand which is the owner of Uniqlo and also Comptoir des Cotonniers, and they also own Fiori. And I understand that Fiori is the majority shareholder of Prensa Schooler. So what was your point about whether it was attached to?
You said there was Valentino group was sold at a loss.
Just the Valentino brand, yes. Permira kept for the Hugo Boss, yeah. Right. So expect in the future to see more deal frenzy going on. Tory Burch, the very, very fast-growing American fashion brand, could be the next candidate for an IPO, and hostile acquisitions are on the books as well, with Hermès, obviously, heavily courted by LVMH. Ferragamo, Chanel might be also targets for acquisitions in the future. And another avenue for going through the capital markets to raise some funds. So you could do that through corporate bonds or high yields, or go to a junior exchange such as AIEM in the UK. Right. In a nutshell, I'd like to say that finding the right finding the right finance partner and finding solutions for your fashion business is critical. It's going to stay with you a long time, and especially if you are a young enterprise, which is at the seed or startup stage, and you are therefore quite vulnerable as a brand. It's really important that, as well as doing a lot of work on producing the best products and fashion out there, you also make sure that you pair up with some savvy and understanding financial partners. Thank you so much for your attention, and if you have some questions, don't hesitate.